a draw for somebody into the park might be Star Wars Rise of the Resistance. But as blown away as people are by that ride, what they often remember, what they often have as an inside joke or a story that they share with their family are those types of experiences you just outlined. We forget that, all right, these equity performers are there for our entertainment, and we don't necessarily we do it with celebrity as well in this society. We do it with these equity performers as well. We don't necessarily even view them as people. We view them as entertainment to us, but they are people, and they are great at what they do. And losing them is heartbreaking for a multitude of reasons. Selfishly, it's that we lose the entertainment aspect of it, but it's also heartbreaking because they are people as well.
That is Tim Grassey of the Marty Called podcast. Tim and I have each come up with a bunch of smaller ways that Disney could enhance the Walt Disney World experience without spending a ton of money at this point. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Thanks for joining me here on episode 123 of the Tomorrow Society podcast. I am your host, Dan Heaton. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving, despite it being a very different experience than normal, that all of you were able to take a little bit of time to just celebrate where we are, even if we are at home right now and not with our extended families. I think we are in a situation where things will start to improve. When that will be is the big question, but as we head more into 2021, I think we will get there. And that's also true with theme parks. Disney World is still open, but it's a very different experience. Disneyland, of course, is closed. And what I'm doing today with Tim Grassey is we are looking ahead to a time when Walt Disney World will be closer to operating the way it used to before the pandemic. But what would we like to see? Like in a situation where Disney is still going to do certain headliners, we don't expect they're going to announce a bunch more new massive expansions or changes, just given the financial situation with the company and just their aversion to risk, I'm sure, after dealing with the last year or so. So instead of kind of being down about it, we're looking at it as, what are some fun things that, given financial constraints, that we would love to see happen at the parks? A lot of them relate to nostalgia or things that are gone, special events, just a variety of ways that maybe, because Disney's not going to get the international travel and maybe some of the bigger trips up first. But how can they entice more locals or more people that might make a small car trip? Especially, we're talking, of course, after there is a vaccine or something like that. And like Tim and I mentioned on the show, of course, the moves we'd want to see first would be the rehiring of cast members, especially entertainment. That goes without saying. This is more in that world where Disney is hiring people back and moving up to full operations once again. What are some changes they could make that, one, would just be fun changes, but two, would also fit with what likely will be the landscape for the parks in the near future? And most of all, for Tim and I, it was just fun to come up with some out-of-the-box ideas. We put some constraints on ourselves to try and come up with other ways that Disney could enhance the experience and just create a better time for guests as they return to the parks. Before we get to Tim, I just released my latest episode of the Tomorrow Society Bulletin, which is my monthly show that I typically do for members through Patreon. Well, for this episode, I've released it to everyone. Basically, it's a preview that you can listen to of what that show is like. I talk about news, trip reports, history, a variety of things. It's just me doing it. This month, I'm talking about all the latest news that Disney has released about attractions coming to Disney World, Disneyland, around the world to their overseas parks. So much information has come out, and I give my thoughts on all of it. And you can hear it if you go to tomorrowsociety.com/bulletin, BULLETIN. You can listen to this episode. It's going to be available to everyone through the end of the year. And this podcast is a listener-supported show, so I don't have any sponsors or ads. The way that I'm able to continue doing this show is through the generous support of members of the Tomorrow Society through Patreon. So after you listen to this episode, you can learn all about the perks of becoming a member and how it helps, and then see if you're interested. I really appreciate all the support this show has gotten, whether it's through Patreon, reviews, anything. And this is just another way to say thanks and to hope that you might be interested in this episode. And I'd love to hear what you think. So it's always cool to connect with Tim on the Marty Called podcast. They do a lot of exercises relating to armchair Imagineering beyond even what Tim and I are doing here. But he seems like the right guy to dig into a lot of various concepts and ideas about the parks. So I hope you enjoy it. Here is Tim Grassey. All right, I am here once again with the owner of WDWThemeParks.com, also the co-host of the Marty Called podcast with Skipper Ben and Josh Fenton. This is his 5th appearance on the Tomorrow Society podcast. I'm sad to say it is a new record as far as guests. It is Tim Grassey. Tim, thank you for coming back once again on the podcast.
You sound disappointed that I'm the only one that's been on the show 5 times.
Never, it's funny. The thing is, it hasn't been that often. I think we haven't done more than one in like a year, but it really tells me how long I've been doing this show. I think the fact that it's been that long, it's like once a year. Oh, it's been 5+ years. Oh my goodness, Tim, what am I doing?
I'd say you've probably been doing it, 6 or 7 years at this point?
I think it's really only a little over 5, really.
Okay.
And actually mostly in the last 2 or 3, but yeah.
Well, this last year counts as 2, so.
Basically, yeah, it's actually been 1, but it's been this year, so that's it.
Now, do I get like a velour jacket or whatever they give on SNL for being a 5-timer?
Yeah, I got to work on that. It might just be a pin. That's all I was saying. That's all. I got a few of those lying around. Well,
unofficially licensed by Disney?
Of course. Well, the Tomorrow Society official pin. Okay, well, Tim is here to talk with me. We're coming up with a bunch of ways. Disney does not have a lot of money right now. And again, this is all hypothetical. We know there are people out there. I
reject that premise to begin with, but yes.
Disney does not have a lot of money they're willing to spend right now. And I will mention, as we're doing this, that we've had some really sad news about cast members being laid off, especially equity performers recently. And, we're coming up with like armchair Imagineering ideas here as things Disney can do without that much money. But obviously the first example is hire those people back. But beyond that goes without saying. I mean, it's just a horrible situation for people that are out of work. But we're doing this more as an exercise of, it's easy on a show like this to say, they should bring back Horizons, create these massive lands on IPs or non-IPs and everything. We're trying to kind of restrict ourselves a little bit. We'll talk about it more in a minute, but that's kind of the general idea. But before we even do that, Tim, I want to know how things are going for you. What's up with Marty Called? How are you doing? What's up with Tim Grassey?
Well, Tim Grassey is doing well, and I'm going to speak like Ricky Henderson for the rest of this interview. So Marty Called, we're doing shows once a month. Dan and I were kind of lamenting or comparing pain points on editing shows, and that's the primary reason why we do one show a month. I love talking with Josh and Ben, much in the same way that I love talking with Chris and Derek back in the day as well. But editing these shows gets to be a bit of a burden. So the shows are shifting back into those armchair Imagineering shows, and as Dan just said, discussing massive spending budget in our hypothetical armchair Imagineering exercises is a little ridiculous right now, but I think we could use a little ridiculous right now in some of these conversations. But I do believe that the focus of this show is to have some of those ideas reined back in for what Disney could do from an Imagineering perspective. We'll get into that later. But as for me personally, we are happy, we are healthy, and in 2020, that's what you can really ask for.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's been an interesting year. I feel like, and like you mentioned, it's one of those things where it's kind of like doing podcasts where you come up with ideas. In one sense, you could say, well, it's trivial, but in another sense, it's like there have to be ways for us to cope with some things that are going on. It's
we need outlets for creativity.
Right. And it's a fun exercise, and I hope you all enjoy it. But kind of sticking with the idea of the pandemic and what's been happening, you and I in the past have talked a lot about, our first show we ever did was like, we should fix Epcot, and you had written an article and we talked about that. And then Disney, of course, amazingly, only a little over a year ago, announced ideas for fixing Epcot, which we talked about on our last show, the neighborhoods in Future World, Moana, Mary Poppins, they're already doing Ratatouille and Guardians and everything else. So I'm curious from your perspective, now, knowing that many of those things, we know some things won't happen, but fast forwarding into the future, how many of those things are actually going to happen, do you think? I mean, how restricted, because I know they're still doing construction. It's still a construction zone. I haven't been there, but how far are they going to pull back Epcot? Are we going to see hardly any of those things?
So we discussed this a little bit on Marty Called as they kind of pulled some things back. They have pretty much announced Spaceship Earth refurb is either not happening or has been delayed. Mary Poppins not happening or been delayed. The tabletop, the festival events pavilion not happening or delayed. I think with that one, they even just said not happening in the current form. So those are things that Disney has already acknowledged. And if they've acknowledged it, it's fair to say they're probably not going to happen at all. Spaceship Earth could have a refurbishment, but it might not be what they described. It would probably be a thinner version of a refurbishment. The things that I think are intriguing is they've cleared out a lot of space, and the path of least resistance might be to effectively rebuild the structures that were there that they just demolished, like rebuilding that kidney shape Communicore building and using that to the purposes that they wanted to use the other buildings, because that would allow them to salvage the existing space and have some semblance of familiarity to Epcot Center. I could see that happening. I could also see them keeping the entire left side as they originally planned, and maybe not necessarily doing something like the Moana Journey of Water and doing some nice landscaping instead and saving, whatever, $25 to $50 million on something like that. It's a little cheaper to set up landscaping than it is to do a rock work walkthrough. So I think they're going to look to cut down costs as much as they can, and no decisions have been made. If you ask me today, or if you ask Josh D'Amaro today what the answer is, and a month from now what the answer is, it's going to be different answers. I just don't think they know right now. They're hitting the pause button on so many different things that they are waiting this out, as we all are. You've probably heard that they're delaying Tron, they're delaying Guardians, they're probably delaying Ratatouille for another few months beyond what we were expected. I think that's their approach right now. They're going to delay until they know they can start having people in the parks again, and they need these things.
Yeah, totally. Because like we're seeing, it's just, even though Disney World is open and it seems crowded because the lines are spaced and everything, they don't even have all their hotels open. They're not getting, a lot of people aren't willing to eat inside. They're only getting 25% of the people. Disneyland isn't open. They are going to, when they're talking about, because at first I thought they'll just build the headliners. They'll just build Ratatouille and Guardians, because that'll be a way, once the capacity gets expanded, whenever that is, to draw people. But I think even the fact that those things are being delayed, part of it is they just want to open them with the big splash when they can really draw crowds, which you can't do now.
Yeah.
But also, I think it's the expenditures. It's anything that basically, the sad thing I mentioned earlier about the entertainers, you could keep people on staff, but I think they're really being And I don't see their books. I have no idea how bad things are. They could be much worse than we anticipate. So I have no idea. But I think anything that's an expense that you cannot immediately say is going to bring in money, which things like Guardians, you're like, they could, if they opened it today, it doesn't really impact their bottom line at all. They can't bring in more people, really.
No, it just really, it starts the clock on depreciation of some of this stuff. That's the accountant in me talking. But I don't know if we've discussed it on this show, but I've discussed it elsewhere, that the primary motivation for Disney to when they open an attraction and perhaps tie it to an intellectual property is to sell it in that year one experience. That's where you're going to get the bookings for the new attractions. And the reason for the delay is to get the most bang for your buck there. Something like Ratatouille, the budget on that was around $220 million, to my knowledge. That was the initial reported budget. I'm sure it's floated up or down somewhere since then, in all likelihood up. Compared to Guardians of the Galaxy, and this is, again, not hyperbole, that budget's about $450 million. When they open an attraction like that, they don't want it to open during a time when they're restricting capacity to 25%. So that's why you're seeing something like Guardians push back to 2022, why Ratatouille, which was initially set to open this summer, is likely not going to open until first quarter of next year. And it's in hopes of getting a little bit more value for it. As you said, that if the parks are running at 25% right now, if they're running at 50%, that's pretty darn close to normal for them. The Disney parks, when they say that they're running at 25%, and I know you know this, but kind of explaining it to your audience in case they don't, they normally run, depending on the park, between 40 and 70% on a daily basis of their overall capacity. So 25% isn't a big swing from that when you factor in many rides are running at reduced capacity themselves. So something like Navi River Journey is running at a significantly throttled capacity, whereas something like Peter Pan's Flight is seeing very little change to its capacity. So all of these things factor into their decisions, and we can agree or disagree with them all we want, but I can at least understand the logic behind it with them wanting to push back something like Ratatouille. Because if they open it up now, you're going to get locals that see it. You're not going to get people planning their trip for it. And the hope of spending $220 million on a ride is that you would get people to plan a trip for it.
Yeah, totally. And the capacity is a really good point, too, because when a lot of these attractions, like, I mean, I don't know how they're exactly doing all of them, but you still are going to have to space people out more, not just in line, but on the attractions themselves. And these attractions were not designed for that. They're designed for a normal non-pandemic world. But before we get into it, I just want to ask, you mentioned about those buildings. I hadn't really thought about them. I mean, the idea what they're going to do with that space, because they've been spending most of their time clearing space, and and they're going to put in that fountain and everything and all that. But it is going to look a little weird if they don't do anything, because then they're going to, at some point, they will want people to be able to walk through that middle. And if the behind there's just nothing, I mean, I guess you could put a Starbucks back in, but I don't, we're back. It was never gone. What are you talking about? But yeah, it's going to be interesting because I know they don't know, and we could speculate all we want, but there's so much space there, but given how much money they still need to spend on some of these big headliners, I have a feeling a lot of it's just going to hang out until well beyond when we think it probably will.
I think you may be right. Or they do a quick fix flower bed or 7 and make it at least look nice so that it's not a construction zone until they're ready to do something more permanent. So they can put in a good aesthetic there that, with the intention of that being temporary, but still not have it be construction wall city for 3 years, because that's the other option, that they just leave up the construction walls until they're ready to begin again. I mean, the other option too, and I suggested this, I don't know, well, I wouldn't have been on the last time with you, but right now they're about to open the main drag of Disney California Adventure without charging admission for shopping purposes. I could see them doing something similar for Epcot, where they close down the attractions if they feel that they don't have the need from an attendance standpoint, and they just make it dining. I could see that happening. Again, not the decision maker here.
What?
But Future World right now is still in such a state of disrepair that you could justify the pandemic as a means or as a reason to not have Future World operating right now and just have World Showcase operating.
No, that makes sense. I really like that DCA idea. Given that they can't open the parks right now, I think I mean, not that I would travel for it, but as like if it was a local kind of thing, I would. I think that'd be really fun. All right, well, let's get into our main topic here, which coming up with some ideas that, again, we tried to restrict ourselves. I'll talk in general. This is the idea is these are not ideas for when Disneyland is or Disney World is set up. These are not ideas for when Walt Disney World is set at 25% capacity. These are ideas for, okay, the parks are, largely open like you would expect. I mean, whether people are going or not is another thing and all that. But they're not having to consider, I'm not coming up with ideas with the idea of distancing and everything else. So it's a little bit of a
let's do it
hypothetical
this.
situation.
Day one, the CDC says they can't wear masks and Disney adheres to, or that people are no longer recommended to wear masks. And Disney is adhering to it. That's what these recommendations are.
Yeah. That's when they decided to do them. Okay. And then also, too, there are some very, very obvious ideas. These are smaller ideas, again, but there are obvious ones that we are not going to put out because, again, you don't need to hear the first example that comes to mind. So, Tim, you talk a little bit about some of the restrictions that you and I have put on ourselves for these ideas.
Yeah, so Dan got to see a glimpse of how Ben, Josh, and I operate, and really it's us coming up with an idea and then me throwing out rules at the 11th hour to make it more interesting. But one of the things we just said was anything that there's like a current rumor about, so things like the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad effects that taken over from Disneyland, a fix to the Yeti, an updated final scene to Carousel of Progress, the Paint the Night Parade coming over. Those are things that have already been discussed. So we kind of eliminated those types of things, although I imagine they may creep into our conversation.
Yeah, that's totally true. Because my first thought was like, oh, last scene to Carousel of Progress. I've written blogs about this. Is great. And I was like, yeah, Tim's like, yeah, let's not use that. Okay. All right. But let's dive into it. So, Tim, I came up with ideas that kind of go to different parks, but I think you kind of did it park by park. But I'd love for you to throw out like either going to a certain park or your first idea that you have that would be something that would be cool to see from Disney.
So I kind of had an overarching theme, overarching, whatever the term is, of what's old is new again. And I'm always going to play up nostalgia, but I also wanted to add in some other enhancements. But the focus being on low-cost offerings, I thought of what is in the existing infrastructure that they could bring back or that they could utilize that would allow for a little bit of a refresh to attractions, or potentially, again, this is still right in line with the 50th anniversary as well. So playing up nostalgia may not be a bad move regardless of what the budget is. So the very first idea I put out there, bring back the Country Bear Jamboree seasonal shows, the Christmas special and the Vacation Hoedown. I don't know what the state of those costumes are, of the programming is. I really don't know what is required to satisfy that. I believe they last ran in the early 2000s. They are also currently being shown in Tokyo. So if you want to steal it from Tokyo and you can make some sort of arrangement with the actual costumes and whatever programming needs to be done, I think it's not unreasonable to do that on the cheap.
Well, it's funny. I'm looking at one of my changes, and I'm going to read the very beginning here. My final change is a summer overlay for the Country Bear Jamboree, possibly the Vacation Hoedown. So I just
Great
laughed.
minds think alike.
Yeah, one thing I did think of with that to play on that is I thought of like they didn't have to do because the Vacation Hoedown had some dead. I saw that a lot. I saw that as a kid more than the original because we always went in June and they were always playing the Vacation Hoedown. So I knew that almost better. And there are some dead spots in that show that we don't need. So I thought of some other songs. I mean, the rights would probably be too expensive, but you have like, they could sing the Go-Go's Vacation. They could sing Summertime by DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Pressfords.
Sure, why not?
They could do Summertime Blues.
The Country Bears, right?
I had written down some, I was like Googling summer songs and I was like, Dan, you're getting a little too in the weeds here, but I don't mean to, yes, I don't mean to jump on your idea, but I love the idea of that. In general, Like my thought is not even just Country Bears is a way to like kind of like the Jingle Cruise too. But I mean, ways to, especially when you're not going to get as many vacationers, especially international, even after things open up, you do need to draw regional and local guests. The way to do that is like Disneyland does by varying things up and bringing in nostalgia and also differences to your normal attractions.
And that's exactly the logic, because what Disneyland does, as you said, is they play to the locals, and Disney is already doing that. And when I use the term locals, California is a pretty darn big state, so local Californians extend to the equivalent of North Carolina or so. And you're already seeing Disney offer specific deals to people that are within driving distance. And to that effect, all right, what is going to get somebody to come down? All right, maybe the Country Bear Jamboree Christmas special isn't going to get somebody to drive and potentially risk their health to drive down. But if the pandemic is in a more stable state and somebody was considering a trip anyway, it might be the thing that pushes them over the top. So those are the types of things that, in general, we should be looking at on this show.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to give my first idea, which is also at the Magic Kingdom. Okay. And I'm calling this the Wedway People Mover Enhancement Project, which these are, the Wedway People Mover doesn't really need any changes. This is kind of like one of those kind of make your strengths better. Like when Disney makes updates to the Haunted Mansion, you're like, the Haunted Mansion is already great. Let's make it even better, or Pirates or whatever. So these are very small changes. Now, amazingly, it's under a refurb, which to me may be saving money. But, you know, they are doing a refurb right now, so they could figure something out. But so my thought was very small things. One, some of the items in the People Mover will really relate to the 1994 New Tomorrowland. They don't really fit anymore. That's not really, they don't have Alien Encounter, they don't have Timekeeper. It's not really set up as a city or a community. So I was thinking we could, some people might get upset, but remove the Alien Barber, remove some of those other pieces. And it used to be when you went by, if you had Wings, Dream Flight, all that, there were a bunch more views. So my first thought was remove those. And granted, I don't know what the views would be on Buzz Lightyear. You may need to make some tweaks and do some things there, but it still wouldn't be very expensive.
You get the back of plywood is what the view's going to be.
They'd have to move things around in Buzz Lightyear to make it a cool view. But my thought, part of it was, let's add some more viewing spots. That's one thing. The second thing with that is Space Mountain. A few years ago, they covered a lot of what was really cool in Space Mountain, where you could see a lot of the ride going up and all that. I'm sure there was a reason, but again, this is my imaginary world. I'm saying rip that out. Have a real view again. Make sure they're getting a good view. Whereas there's a weird part in there where you're just like in the dark. And I know you get to hear the music, but you get a better view of the ride and the queue and the effects and everything. And again, like you mentioned, we're kind of playing to nostalgia there, because a lot of people remember being a kid and going on the People Mover, and you go by and you could hear those coasters going up and you had a much better view. So that's one other thing I would do. A third thing, I would look at that Progress City model, and again, it looks pretty good, but maybe like spruce that up, make it shine, make it look better, add new paint, add new lighting. And then the last
Have you seen the Epcot experience, Dan?
I have not been there since they did that. When I was there, it must not have been open yet. I think it was open soon after I was there, because I was there.
It opened October 1st.
Yeah, I was there in September. So yeah.
Okay. So they digitally mapped that model, and I'm sure you've seen video or pictures of it. Do that to the Progress City model. Give it life.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, and even things like that, like you saw in that Epcot experience, some things they can do with just some basic, like, the visuals and everything. You could do some things like that on the People Mover. The last thing I was thinking of was, you're going by these attractions, and I know you go by and you hear Great Beautiful Tomorrow and you hear different things, but do a little more things like that. Play more music, add more connections to the attractions. Part of it is you have kind of attractions that aren't really there, like Stitch isn't there and Monsters.
Yeah, they're all closed right now.
Yeah, so it's not a great example, but I just think about, I'm trying to think of ways like make that experience better. And again, this is another idea of changes that are small and don't cost a lot, but a lot of people, especially with nostalgia, would go, wow, I like what they did there. This is more fun even. So what do you think?
I'm 100% on board. I had the thought but didn't write it down on doing you can take your form of whatever TTA updates you want to see, but there are spots, as you outlined, where the barber is, a handful of other just kind of talking points, audio cues. All of that is definitely doable, definitely inexpensive, that they could do. I mean, I'd love to see more of those dioramas, and whether they're constructed on that stretch between Carousel of Progress and Buzz Lightyear, where you've kind of got that flat wall. I don't really know where else they could be where they could be put in, but those types of dioramas showing, pick your poison, whether it's Tomorrowland Past, and that's kind of a contradictory statement, or some sort of additional type of futurism, I'm on board. But I think that those are the types of things where you're not necessarily like adding animatronics, but you're adding static figures, maybe some lighting, maybe some audio cues, and it enhances the experience.
Totally. You could actually do something very similar with the railroad, too, where you could add some things like that. I didn't put that as an example, but that's a great example where there are a lot of points in the railroad where I'm like, I'd love to just see something besides the woods. And I love the railroad, but there are points where you could do something. Or even when you go by Tron over there, people have talked about this isn't a new idea. Well, what if they put in the primeval world, not primeval world, excuse me, the Grand Canyon diorama, the primitive world, that idea, and that's not a new idea, but something like that, that might be too extensive with animatronics and stuff. It might have to be simpler, but ways to spice that up without like dramatically changing what it is.
No, I agree. And although the railroad is closed, I'm going to guess until Tron opens up at this point.
Yeah.
That if it's closed right now, there's an excuse already for them to not open it up. But to your point, there are, as you said, dead spots on there. I believe, I don't know when it was. It might have been in discussions for the 50th that Jim Hill and Len Testa discussed the idea of changing the Native American area to be something that's a little more authentic, which would be certainly well and good, but it doesn't necessarily address the other dead points that you're referencing. But I am all for those types of minor enhancements in general, regardless of the financial and worldwide circumstance that we're in.
For sure. Okay, well, what is another idea you have, Tim?
So in years past, the focus at Disney has been getting 2 to 3 admissions a day for people with the Christmas and Halloween parties, as well as early morning magic. And now they're struggling to get a single admission. So backstage, we have the Boo to You parade and the Mickey's Once Upon a Christmas Time parade. I want to show those during regular park hours. I also want to utilize some of those seasonal / party updates that they've used in the past at Pirates and Space Mountain. You can update the Space Mountain projectors as well, but use things that they've done already, but during normal park hours as a means of drawing crowds. Because when people are tightening their purse strings, it's less likely that you're going to get them to spend $200 for an early morning and another 90 to 100 ahead for the parties. So bring those assets that you have as a means of getting more people into the park during normal park hours.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. It kind of fits with even some of the other things we discussed in terms of drawing regional people and locals, which is not the only goal, but it's what you do when the economy is bad, is you go back to kind of, okay, well, what are people we can get? You offer them crazy deals. You offer them hotel discounts. You bring in things like they do this in Disneyland a lot, where they have those like theme nights with all the old characters and stuff.
Yeah,
this is kind of on that zone, but it's things that people like me, I've never been to those parties and I've thought about it, but like, I don't know, I would pay the money for it. And that would be really cool to see.
The nostalgia of long lost characters, they did that in 2012 during Limited Time Magic, and they've brought them back since then. But those are the types of experiences when we're allowed to have traditional character meets that are hugely popular. And those are the things where you have the existing infrastructure. You basically just need an individual that can comfortably fit in the costume. So, I mean, each costume has their own height requirements, but other than that, you can satisfy those asks with existing infrastructure. And those are the types of things that they should be looking at. So that was another big one for the Magic Kingdom. I only really had one additional small one for the Magic Kingdom. And this is just a personal preference of mine. Do you recall on Pirates of the Caribbean ever having like a blast of air go across your face in the battle scene?
I think so. I mean, it seems like something that they used to do but again, a lot of those memories, I've been on it so much, like kind of rolling
Sure.
together, but it sounds familiar.
I'd say within the last 10 years, I have had a friend's hat blown off on Pirates of the Caribbean. And it was comical, but it's something small like that is that you don't anticipate on attractions that I would just love to see turned back on.
Yeah.
That's certainly not going to move the needle, but you're talking about small enhancements. That's one that I want to see return. I think the bigger things for me for the Magic Kingdom are a return to some of those seasonal offerings and making them accessible to regular park guests. So Country Bears, as I said, and the holiday parades for both Halloween and Christmas, bringing those back into park guests.
No, I think those are great. And I do love the little additions. Like the example that's always given is when they put in the animatronics and the Three Caballeros, and just one day all of a sudden
Sure.
they were there. And it was like, what? Where it doesn't have to be that big, but it can even be something where sometimes the attractions are so static and it's like, get a little silly, or I know everything costs money and you have to have somebody design it and you have to test it. It's not as simple as just turning a switch, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it's that simple.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. And I mean, you can look at something like Space Mountain, where they did the off-board audio additions. They did that overnight. I mean, they were probably installing things for months, but they just flipped it on overnight. You mentioned the Three Caballeros. That's another one. And this is going to come up later from what's old is new again, is Toy Story Mania, when the one time that they switched games on that. If it was down for 2 days, I'd be surprised. Those types of things can be done relatively quickly.
Yeah, and same with like Star Tours when they do things for the new movies. All right, well, I'm going to give my next idea. I know you're doing a good job of going park by park, so we'll eventually hit a point where you're just going to be giving ideas. But I'm going to go with my second thought. I mean, we've already talked about a third one of mine, but
Sure.
This is more, I call this is not really like an Imagineering or idea. This is called addition by subtraction is the name of this. And I have not named all of them.
What are we killing?
I think I have already given away the ones that have titles. I was very clever early on. But so here's a bunch of moves I'm going to reel off that are a variety of things that I think, this is all you have to do here. And one of them might cost some money. The others are more just structural. Well, first one is kind of more Imagineering, is we're just going to take the Beauty and the Beast sing-along as a sunk cost. Everybody hates it. I know they're trying to sell Beauty and the Beast, but I don't think that really helps the movie very much. So I'm saying you've got Ratatouille there. You've got a character that's going to open.
That's not moving units on DVDs. I'm telling you.
No, so we're removing Beauty and the Beast. Impressions of France just got a new, it got redone really recently in terms of it basically they did in high HD. I mean, they made it look so much better. And then now they're only playing it a little bit, especially with low capacity. I mean, I can't imagine indoors low capacity, how many people are really. But Impressions of France is amazing. And I know it's not everyone's favorite show, but neither is the 360 movie in China or Canada or whatever. Neither is Awesome Planet. Sometimes it's okay to have things like that where very few people are going to go into Impressions of France and say, like, that was terrible. That was awful. Yes, there'll be a few where I've heard that many times. I think they're actually hurting the brand with the sing-along, so remove that. I know that was supposed to be rapid fire, but I spent a lot of time on that. Second thing, dining plan, not coming back. It's gone. We don't need it. It's just the benefits don't outweigh the negatives. Keep ADRs at 60 days instead of 180. Remove FastPass Plus from all shows and 3D movies. See how that goes, and maybe even go further. But start there because, again, people complained constantly when Disney was going full on about it being too complicated, about there being too many things you had to learn. Why not use this as an opportunity? And I know there's things they may do instead, like pay FastPass or other things. That's a whole nother podcast. Remove all those things. Last thing, totally unrelated. Tear down Primeval World. You're never going to open it again. It's really ugly. Why not tear it down? I don't care. Put a show there. It doesn't matter. Put some characters there. That is such an ugly attraction in the Dino Land area. Eventually, we can get to the rest of Chester and Hester's Dinorama. We're just starting there. That's the most expensive of all these if you don't think about possibly FastPass and things, the money there. But all those things, nobody's going to complain about most of those things. That's what I will say.
So you hit on a lot there, and that was a very angry rant, Dan. But I kind of appreciate a lot of it. A few things. Dining plans are not going away. I would be shocked, and I'll put an arbitrary timeline. Let's say vaccine fit for public consumption plus a year, dining plans are back. I'd probably put money on that. I'd put an Ohana dinner on that.
I agree.
But to your point on other things, what that doesn't necessarily mean, though, is 180 days out. I think that Disney would be wise to, there's a term in business, never let a good crisis go to waste. It's heartless, but it's a situation where they can reset. They can look at what have we been doing that is met with mixed emotions, mixed opinions, that potentially causing people to not return. I know that there are people that absolutely love FastPass Plus, and you and I, well, we may be detractors of it. We've certainly benefited from it. I know that just understanding the system gives you an advantage over a person that doesn't do the necessary research going to the park, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be a situation where you can show up to the park day of, and the learning curve for how to ride a ride should not be that difficult. But to that point, I could absolutely see the FastPass Plus version that we know having been retired in full mid-March of 2020. That it's gone. What we saw that prior to them shutting down will never be seen again. I think that is very realistic, and I'm hopeful that that's the case. What form it takes, I don't know, but if it's a return to just regular standby lines, I think a lot of people would love that. But I do like the idea of some sort of priority line, whether it's pay for use, whether it's reverting back to the legacy FastPass. I don't know what form it is, but I want something better than what they've had the last 5 years.
Yeah, I'm such a hypocrite too, because I'll complain about it and such, but we were going to go to Disneyland, and I was so ready to pay for Max Pass and be so pumped about it. And I would, and I shouldn't say this, but I would pay more than they were charging because it's
Max Pass
such
is
a
great.
big deal. So that's the sad thing where, if they offered pay Fast Pass, I might complain, but I would use it unless it would be an insane amount of money. I would still pay for it.
I would absolutely welcome Max Pass being employed in Walt Disney World. If Walt Disney World reverted to Disneyland's rules for dining and for Fast Pass utilization, I'd be 100% on board. It is so much less stressful. I don't know if that's good English. It is significantly less stressful going on a vacation in Disneyland than it is in Disney World.
Totally.
Because it has to be. The market speaks to that. With the locals just demanding they don't want to have to plan this out 60 days in advance. They don't want to be shut out of Radiator Springs Racers because they didn't wake up 60 days ahead of when they were planning on going on a whim.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway.
All right. Well, Tim, let's get to your next ideas. I believe whichever park you want to go to.
I'm going to bounce to Epcot now. And this is playing up the nostalgia. They've done this in the past, and I'd like to see them do it again. Use the Magic Eye Theater for nostalgia. They've used it for Captain EO in the past. There are 3D shows in Disney's history that they could bring back. One suggestion would be Magic Journeys. Another would be Captain EO. I could see them cycling through Honey, I Shrunk the Audience. Any of these would be welcome, as opposed to something that you can now see on Disney Plus, which is what you're currently getting with the Pixar shorts. So bring back some of the older components there. If it's a mini documentary on the creation of Epcot Center, I'm 100% on board. We've seen some of that great content on Disney Plus currently with the Imagineering docuseries. You could put together a 20-minute clip of archival footage of the construction of Epcot, and I'm in. So that's what I'd like to see, an existing facility like the Magic Eye Theater used for something other than what it's currently being used for.
Yeah, the only reason I didn't put this is because I spent like 20 minutes on this, almost the same idea. Not the Epcot one, that's great, but the other ones, because I've thought about this for a while. Like, again, it's kind of that idea. I love the idea of rotating films. Like, one is nostalgia. You're bringing back things you already have. Two, you're rotating things. Maybe you rotate it day to day. Maybe you use a few within the day.
Sure,
maybe you have weeks. These are all ideas. This is how you get people to come back who may be hesitant at some point, is you make things feel different. You make it feel like an event. Maybe you have special events there with 3D movies, which I don't know if that's really made for it, but you show something we haven't seen for a while. I mean, I don't know. There's so many good options that we just came up with in a very short period of time that are so much better than what's there now. And this seems like the perfect opportunity to do it, especially with the 50th anniversary and then the 40th anniversary of Epcot coming right after it.
Right. And I do think that a lot of these ideas, unfortunately, aren't going to really, and not necessarily that Disney is listening to this, but a lot of these smaller enhancements, they're probably not going to make many changes until the end of 2021, early 2022. I think that is a realistic time frame that we are. Unfortunately, 2020 is going to continue for the foreseeable future, but we can.
Years.
Yes. To that nostalgia point as well, and this is more of a quick hit, I also put in nostalgia food booths as well at Epcot because we're thinking and focusing on attractions, but I know that there are legacy dining options that fans of Disney World past, I'm sure, are remembering things like the Handwich and things like that they brought back at various festivals. I'd like to see a couple of dedicated booths to that at the various festivals that they run throughout the year. Again, it's easy enough to do. You just look through old cookbooks and come up with old foods.
Yeah, and actually that kind of fits more with the way that they're probably going to have to still, approach Epcot for a while, is understandably so given, beyond the headliners is more as a festival place, as a way to
right, absolutely.
They're still doing it. Even they're going to have the Festival of the Arts, and they did a modified version of Food and Wine and stuff. So they're still doing that, and fun nostalgia is never a terrible idea there. So I'm going to quickly go through my thought, which I know will never happen because DVC members are important. But my thought is like you fix that area above Imagination. Like, yeah, Imagination has a pavilion. If we had a lot of money, we already talked to a Magic Guy, but that ride and everything is totally where you go. But that's way beyond what we can do here. But I think right now the downstairs ImageWorks, half the things don't work. Half the things nobody, like I tried to send something to myself and the keyboard didn't work when I've been there before. Just basic stuff that we don't even need that stuff. And plus also too, there's a lot of, in the future, I think things that involve a lot of touching fingers onto things may not be as likely, but they have things down there. Like we're going to bring up a few of the things, like you play the orchestra with your hands, the things where you can walk on the floor. We can make a little star tunnel up there, but the biggest draw, so you're kind of making the ImageWorks upstairs. But again, I'm trying not to spend a ton of money. We're not just putting back in everything, but we're making it a really nice space. But that view is the draw. Like things you can do that are fun up there, that everyone should get to go up there and see that view and experience some things. And right there, you're kind of setting the stage too for down the road when you can redo that ride and use that downstairs space that is being wasted for that. But in the meantime, let's put a Figment meet and greet downstairs. Let's do that. Or upstairs, maybe if you have extra space. Really play into Imagination instead of just the latest, let's meet Wreck-It Ralph or whatever. Let's actually put Figment in there. And if Dreamfinder was in the ride, I would say Dreamfinder, but that doesn't really fit. But do some things like that. Like move that upstairs, make it a fun place to be again, not just for DVC members. Sorry, DVC members. And, you could do it on a fairly cheap way, and you're also kind of arranging the pieces for something more major in the future.
Have you been up there since they made it a DVC lounge?
No, I have not.
I did have the opportunity to go up there. I'm not a DVC member, but a friend is. So I went up there in October. It is a great view. It almost feels sterile up there. Which when you consider the old pin tables and that sort of thing, really the opposite of what it actually used to be. But it is very white up there, and by all means that can be changed. But it felt great to be up there. It felt really great to just look out that view, as you said. And I have certainly zero reservations about moving stuff upstairs. Now, to your point on, say, a Figment meet and greet, are you thinking like giant Figment or some sort of puppeted like they used to do? I know you said not necessarily with Dreamfinder, but some sort of puppeted Figment.
I was thinking giant Figment, but now I think about it, that doesn't totally match the ride at all. So I'm like, I don't know then. That's what
there's ways to do it. You could do it kind of like the Shrek and Donkey meet and greet over at Universal, where you have somebody in the back manipulating, in the case Donkey. That could work, but a way to meet Figment, a way to pose and take pictures with Figment would be great. So I'm all for it. And I don't know that moving things up there is going to be something that's on Disney's radar because they're not going to necessarily quantify the nostalgia there. But I certainly buy into it. We shall see. We shall see.
All right, Tim, let's go to the next park here.
Actually, I got a couple more in Epcot.
Oh,
if you,
go for
don't
it. Go to Epcot, yeah.
So this is not really nostalgia based. This is just taking advantage of what's there. So I don't know how you feel about the Test Track update. I say that it's 8 years old at this point. How do you feel about Test Track relative to the previous version?
I like the music. I like the effects, like the kind of futuristic Tron-like effects. Mm-hmm. The car thing, my daughters love designing the cars, but I find when you get on the ride, it's kind of pointless after that.
This is my bullet point. More substantial refurb. Better utilize the screens alongside the ride vehicle to race your concept vehicles.
Ah, very smart.
So I solved your problem. And they have the existing. Well, let's call a spade a spade. The monitors that show your vehicle and how it did on the previous test work. I don't know, about 40% of the time.
Yeah.
I don't know that people are going to really be upset if they're racing a random vehicle as opposed to their concept vehicle if something doesn't work right. I mean, it's still going to be better than Fast and Furious. So the way that I would do it is there are some straightaway segments where you could basically see how your concept vehicle would compare to the vehicle that you're in and play up that approach to it. But I think that makes it so that the design of the ride vehicle at the head of the attraction is a little bit more relevant, because I think that design part screams Epcot Center. I think it really does pull in that edutainment component that you and I miss so much. So better utilizing that in the attraction is something that I'd like to see.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm kind of grading on a curve too, because I look at it and I appreciate what they were trying to do. And I think that it's cool that it doesn't have an IP and that it was done, fairly recently. I mean, it's been a little while. And so I feel like I like a lot of the things they did with it. And I think I talked about this when I had my Epcot podcast. I feel like there's just a few tweaks you can make with more modern technology that would make that. It's still very popular, but make it even more beyond just the thrill of going outside and going really fast.
Yeah, agreed. So, I have more things for Epcot, but why don't you hit up your next one?
Okay, well, I don't think, I'm going to see if my other ideas, we've already hit on a lot of mine. So really, I just say keep going, because one of my other ideas and my secondary thing was rotating series of films at Magic Eye Theater. We've covered that. We're good. Perfect. But yeah, I've covered Epcot so much. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts.
Okay, so not just in Epcot, but in general, look at attractions that have the ability to play up nostalgia again. So Spaceship Earth, you have the option for playing up older narrations. I know that there are scenes that don't fit in with the Walter Cronkite version in the existing version. So perhaps either you switch over to the Judi Dench narration there, or you're silent. You could put Tomorrow's Child as the backdrop of The Descent. That would certainly be welcomed by Epcot Center purists. Over at Living with the Land, I'd like to hear the instrumental version of the original Listen to the Land song at the end, and applicable areas throughout the ride. Then moving over to Hollywood Studios, Toy Story Mania is an easy enough attraction to update with new games, yet they've only done it once. But in as much as there's nostalgia to be had in Hollywood Studios, bring back Bo Peep's Balloon Pop. Why not? And the other big thing that I suggested there for a nostalgia purpose was, I think there's a way to do the original Star Tours with C-3PO as the pilot instead of Rex. Anthony Daniels is alive and well, can record some new audio, and they could basically bring back the original Star Tours for a limited engagement as a means of nostalgia over there.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. And I also obviously had not thought of the Bo Peep change. That's
well, yeah. That was more a cry for, let's bring in some new games, please.
Yeah, totally. Because they've done a good job with, in general, with Star Tours and like making it, they've been doing updates. I've been impressed with the films. I agree. I just think that there's other examples, whether you talk about Mission Space or some others where
Soarin'.
I'm like, can you change Soarin'? You can change it up more. Even Soarin', you only have 2 films, but you have 3 theaters, right. Or just do California full time in California, something, not just
I'm
limited.
100% there.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things you could do. I know that's not really what we're getting into, but there are things you could do for variability that do not cost a lot of money, especially by the standards of Disney and theme parks.
Right. So to that point, things over at like Tower of Terror, they've introduced new drop profiles and they've done a entire summer promotion based on that. They can do that. These are things that can be reprogrammed, and special effects, lighting effects, sound effects, all modified slightly using existing infrastructure. All you're doing is using your creative talent that you have not let go and finding minor tweaks to enhance things. As you said, you see these enhancements on a grander scale to things like Pirates and Haunted Mansion with regularity, but these minor tweaks can be done at attractions across the board. So I threw out Tower of Terror. I think a thought as well over at Rock and Roller Coaster is on a temporary basis, you could do away with the entire conceit of visiting a music studio, take a page out of California Adventure's Monsters After Dark with seasonal based attractions for that. You've got a ride vehicle that has onboard audio and a dark room. So you can really do whatever you want with that fits those guidelines. Just again, the goal here is to kind of use as little or use as much of the existing infrastructure as possible in new ways. So to that point, I had my idea for Test Track, which I think was a bit of a grander change. I'd like to see something similar over at Millennium Falcon, Smuggler's Run. And I know it's a brand new attraction. It's been open for, a year and a half, if that. This ride really should have been a mission through the Kessel Run. I don't know why it wasn't done that way, but there were also reports at the outset that they would have multiple missions. So I'd like to see a development of some sort of Kessel Run mission that the Millennium Falcon goes on.
Yeah, to me, the multiple missions is if once they get through kind of, actually having Rise of the Resistance open for a long time and, in full capacity. But in that land, I have a different idea for that land I'll mention in a minute, but just staying on Smuggler's Run, I think it almost makes it it's like Star Tours. Like, it had gotten to a point where I enjoyed it, but sometimes it's just like, I don't really know. It kind of makes me feel a little queasy. The original Star Tours,
Adventures Continue is a much better version.
And now it's like, I remember you go and you want to go on it more times because it's like there's so many different things. And even that was even before you had all the movie themed ones. I'm just talking about that first iteration where they had like the different, of course I kept getting the same one every time. And then I just kept going on it because I was so annoyed. So yeah, there's a lot of things you could do there. But I can mention my thought about Galaxy's Edge unless you have more from Epcot you want to talk about.
No. And I just want to reiterate your point on Star Tours that I'd say on, prior trips with OG Star Tours, I might go on it 1 out of 5 times in that park. It was that infrequent. Whereas now it's probably 4 out of 5 times. So anyway, continue.
Totally. All right. So I had a different thought with Galaxy's Edge. So
okay.
I was trying to think of, and I know this isn't that cheap, but ways they could make it cool without, building free roaming droids or something. But one of the things I really enjoyed, I went before Rise of the Resistance was open, was just, it was still like a week or two open at Disney World. And they had a lot of like walk around stormtroopers and walk around characters, but it still felt like they could be doing a lot more. So there's kind of 2 areas to that. One, I think they should have live music there. And I'm not sure where that would be. And you could come up with something that's kind of like outside, like a cantina type band, but maybe in that area with the big ship in the back where people just take pictures in front of the ship, which is a little strange. But you could use that stage for something and actually have periodic entertainment, kind of like they do with Harry Potter, where you have
That's a perfect example.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where it's like, come on, make this land more lively. Second part is you should hire improv actors to walk around, and whether they can be, sometimes they're stormtroopers, sometimes they're various characters, and they do this a little bit, but I feel like that is a cheap relatively speaking, you're not building a ride, fairly cheap way to just change the entire mood of that land. Because whenever stormtroopers or people come around and mess with people, the entire crowd, the whole vibe of it changes, where everyone just starts laughing and people are taking pictures and all these types of things. And actually, most of the things you and I talked about are things that are really good for the world of social media and people putting things out there and talking about, I saw this or this happened or whatever. It's so easy in theory to do things like this, and people I say this at the same time where a bunch of the Streetmosphere people were just let go, which is really sad, but people like a Streetmosphere type attitude, maybe a little more serious in Galaxy's Edge, something like that, but where people come back because they want to see certain characters or what happens.
I think that, and this is going to be cold, but I think it's the truth. I think that those atmospheric things are not understood at the executive level at Disney, that they don't understand the value of them. And yes, that a draw for somebody into the park might be Star Wars Rise of the Resistance, but as blown away as people are by that ride, what they often remember, what they often have as an inside joke or a story that they share with their family are those types of experiences you just outlined. We forget that, all right, these equity performers are there for our entertainment, and we don't necessarily we do it with celebrity as well in this society. We do it with these equity performers as well. We don't necessarily even view them as people. We view them as entertainment to us, but they are people, and they are great at what they do. And losing them is heartbreaking for a multitude of reasons. Selfishly, it's that we lose the entertainment aspect of it, but it's also heartbreaking because they are people as well. And to your point, when Star Wars Galaxy's Edge opened, it lacked kinetic energy, and you just hit on a couple of things that would solve that relatively easily. Adding live music, I didn't think about that component of it, but it's great if you can have performances, on the hour or something like that. 10 to 15 minute performances. Maybe you have people rolling out of the cantina and they ultimately find their way to a stage. I'm on board because the land doesn't have music, so that does give it that atmospheric element. And then if you have more, the best interactions in that land are with the stormtroopers. But if you have more things like that, then you're really going to make that land come to life. And sure, you may not be able to justifiably do free roaming droids in that land because your kid is going to kick it over and you're out a $500,000 robot, but people can help make these experiences better. And I don't know if you've ever listened to a Ron Schneider interview where he spent a lifetime in theme parks in themed entertainment, just putting smiles on people's faces. And that's the type of thing that these entertainment cast members do. That those are the things that you truly remember, not your 10th ride on Pirates of the Caribbean. And we love these attractions, but the true memories that stick with people are not, hey, that pirate nodded his head slightly to the left this time. It's the experience with the entertainment cast members that generally are the reasons why people tell stories about Disney, or it's an interaction with a character, things like that.
Totally. And that, I think that's a great point, because I think back to when I was a kid, and yes, I enjoyed rides and everything, but the moments I think back to are the most random ones, like my dad getting pulled on stage at Busch Gardens to play Tarzan in some show, or like, my daughters and I went to Silver Dollar City and they were doing some like impromptu water balloon tossing thing with all these people. I mean, the dumbest things, like really cheap. Dumb, I don't mean in a bad way. I mean like the simplest things, like your basic things. Or I think of like Frontierland, where they have some random show where somebody, with audience participation. These are things that do not show up in ROI. And I'm not just picking on Disney executives. This is in general. But you think about, I have not been to Knott's Berry Farm, but I know they had their kind of ghost town area with a lot of characters that people always raved about. Things like that don't show up like, as an easy way to justify it. But that is how you get people like us as adults talking about theme parks and stuff, experiences like that as a kid, and then hopefully experiences like that with our kids. And sometimes they still have it, but people that are that good to be performers and such, and I don't mean to take this completely off of what we were doing, but I think it's a really important point, is they're not cheap. They're not anybody. These are professionals that are really good at creating creating magic. Oh my goodness. Creating magic. And then
it's cliche, but it's true.
It's totally true. And great shows, it's totally there.
And I mean, to that point, you see what you mentioned it on social media. Those are the things that truly trend. You see the child having an interaction with their favorite princess and melting and things like that really it gets dusty when you see those sorts of things on social media. So it's why this is tough, and I really hope that as soon as they can, and it should have been yesterday, that Disney starts hiring these individuals back. And I hope that Disney is lucky enough that the individuals return, because they really do enhance the vacation.
Totally. Yeah. So we have hit on my big ideas so far, but I know that it doesn't mean we have to stop. We haven't talked about Animal Kingdom at all. I have one idea for that I can mention, but I'd love to hear that, or if you have anything else from Hollywood Studios you want to mention.
So no, I'm good to move over to the Animal Kingdom. And my first bullet point says not a whole lot of nostalgia options here. So the next thing that I wrote on here, and I also captioned it with, I really don't like this idea, but bring back for the 62nd time the Discovery riverboats. In theory, you could put something along the riverfront, but that's really what they have for nostalgia purposes there. Short of like bringing back some old narratives on Kilimanjaro safaris. But what I would like to see them do is utilize that Finding Nemo the musical theater. Nothing against the show. Unfortunately, all of those cast members have been laid off as well. But it is a theater that is a blank canvas for a new show, and they can use whatever course of action they feel is appropriate. But it is a Broadway style size theater that can basically be a clean slate for them. So I'd like to see them come up with some sort of new entertainment to replace the Finding Nemo the musical show.
Interesting. It's funny because I've seen that show more even probably than Festival of the Lion King, just because of where it's located and how we tour, where you kind of hit this point after Asia where it's really hot and you're like, we've got to go inside, we got to do something, and we're always right there. So I've seen it a lot, and I think it's a great show, but I think, like any show that you've seen for a long time, there's always, and like you mentioned, it's not really even in a land. So it's even different than like The Lion King and Africa and everything. It's kind of near Dinoland and kind of near Asia, where it's almost
technically
like
Dinoland.
Yeah, it could be anything.
So it gives them, it's a clean slate. I mean, Finding Nemo doesn't fit in Dinoland at all, but it's technically where it is geographically located. But to that point, I mean, originally it was Tarzan there, which didn't really fit in Dinoland either. So it's a clean slate. It's a theater. Do with it what you will, but do something with it. I'd like to see that. We said at the outset that we wouldn't mention the Yeti, so we're not going to mention fixing the Yeti. Would be something that would be too obvious. The other options are adding new animal species to the parks. In the Oasis, the Tree of Life exhibits, Rafiki's Planet Watch is kind of fodder for new animal species. I think a way to get people out to Rafiki's Planet Watch is to put some sort of desirable, for lack of a better word, a more engaging or interesting animal species, something like koalas that don't require a lot of space, but perhaps require some indoor space, could get people out to Rafiki's Planet Watch. Those are the types of things that I'd like to see there, but there really isn't much from a nostalgia perspective. I think Animal Kingdom's additions, unfortunately for that park, are probably, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment to, as you said, replace Primeval Whirl or put an attraction between Everest and Dinoland where there's space as well. So.
Yeah, I think you hit on the thing about the animals is interesting, just because I've been watching the Disney Plus series where they show them caring for the animals, which is kind of interesting. I mean, it's a little bit like a lot of other kind of, it's just like the zoo that they show on the San Diego Zoo. They did one, Bronx Zoo. They've done them. Yeah, it's very similar in vibe. But it's cool too, just to kind of, it's almost like what they're showing is a completely separate place from the theme park. It just really shows that, and it reminds me of that. So anything they can do to kind of spotlight that, like, I think is always a plus. And Rafiki's Planet Watch, I know they've kind of been still trying to figure out what to do there, where they have, they had the drawing things there, the things that didn't really seem to fit in there at all. But I think, I love the idea of Rafiki's Planet Watch and just the whole taking the train and getting out there and what could be there. I think there's potential there for sure, given just the trick there is just it takes a lot to get there, especially if you're walking.
It's a time commitment.
Yeah. But my thought was Dinosaur, not change it that much, but I like Dinosaur. I think it's kind of underrated given just it's actually like a big headliner attraction that it's now kind of become something different because it's a little too scary. It's a little, but I feel like the technology we've seen with Indiana Jones, how great the technology is, and it's never totally clicked with Dinosaur. And I was just thinking about making some small tweaks, whether sometimes it's about, I know you want to make it dark, but making it a little more visible, making it a little more, because there's a lot of things happening that you barely see on that ride, adding a few new effects. Sometimes things don't work so well, like even the final big where it comes up and the dinosaur screams at you. The last time I went on it, it showed up and there was no sound, or it was so, I hate to just give the most generic, hey, make everything work. But I think that, as recently as last September, it all didn't work completely when I wrote it. So I think that there's that. It's easy to say, well, it doesn't draw or whatever. But I think, from the pre-show and the walkthrough and everything and the ride vehicles, there's still more potential to that than what they're doing right now.
They did do a minor update to it with additional effects, I don't know, a couple years ago. And it helped a little bit. But to your point, there is a lot of darkness in that ride. And I think that was a budgetary thing where it feels like this was the original ride and Indiana Jones was what followed up, where they took the ride system and then really ran it out with Indiana Jones. But as it is as an attraction, I don't know if some of those darker areas could be enhanced with, again, you look at projections. They like to do that. If it enhances the experience, I'm all for it. Because you have enough physical sets in there, you can supplement those physical sets with additional effects, be they lighting, be they projections, be they both, be they audio, whatever it may be. So I'm certainly on board with any of those types of minor enhancements to existing attractions.
Cool. Well, do you have any other ideas for any park right now or in general that you have not mentioned?
I do not. I am at the end of my list.
Okay, well, me too. So before we finish, Tim, I had a game that we were going to play, which I've never done something like this before. I've kind of gotten to the point where I often ask kind of silly questions. I had Ben Lancaster ranking which one of the Horizons people were the worst, so that was fun. But we're not doing that this time. I think I enjoyed that more than he did. But this is what I'm going to do for you. Very simple. I'm going to read you.
I'm saying Jules Verne, by the way. He's a jerk.
No, it wasn't one. We landed on the boy who can't get the teddy bear was the worst of the options because he's putting everyone in danger with that teddy bear. Okay. But so I'm going to read you 5 quotes, one at a time. And you're going to tell me. So basically, all these
Is one of them going to be like Hitler and I'm going to look like a jerk?
No. Don't worry about that. All these quotes were said by either Walt Disney, Michael Eisner, or Bob Iger, and one of the 5 was written by me. Okay. Was just like to
so who are my options?
So your options are Walt Disney, Michael Eisner, Bob Iger. Bob Chapek, sorry, did not make the list. I had to keep it at 3. So your options, one of those 3, and then one of these 5 is a trick. So I'm not going to tell you how many the others are, but one of the 5 is a trick. And everyone appears at least once. Okay.
Everybody is represented at least once, and you were only represented once.
Yeah, I'm only represented once. Everyone else is at least once, which means one person is in there twice.
Got it. Okay.
So here we go. Number 1. The acquisition of these brands and the creation of intellectual property behind them have had a tremendous impact on growing our returns at the parks. The success of these has allowed us to raise our margins significantly. Who said this?
It screams Bob Iger. I don't know if this is a bit of a red herring or not, but I'll go with Bob Iger because that's what it screams.
That is correct. This is Bob Iger from the infamous Barron's article from January 8th, 2019. I thought it'd be too easy to give the quote that they later retracted about the Expedition Everest. roller
Did you happen to
coaster
see who got them to
wherever.
retract that quote? Dan?
I did not. Was that
It's
you?
yours truly.
That's where he responded to you on Twitter, right?
Yep, exactly.
That was your finest hour, Tim.
I don't know if that's true, but whatever.
All right. Well, good job on the first one. I felt that was a little bit of a gimme, but I
Yeah.
could have been fooling you. Okay. Number 2. Approving an e-ticket thrill ride, we quickly discovered, is a decision equivalent to greenlighting a high-budget movie, both risky and expensive. It was here that we first came up against the historical conflict between our Imagineers and the operators.
That sounds like Eisner to me.
Is that your final answer?
It is.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is Michael Eisner from his book, Work in Progress. He was talking about greenlighting Splash Mountain.
Okay.
It's fun to go through like a very long book and pick out one quote. I did not reread the whole book to come up with the best quote, I will tell you. Okay, number 3. We've developed a new vision for what the Disney company can be. Synergy between brands, theme parks, characters, and storytelling is what matters to maximize our long-term profitability, to provide the best experience for our shareholders and our guests too.
I think you're trying to get me to say Iger, but I believe that's Eisner as well.
Sorry, that is the fake quote.
Okay.
That was I was like, how many words could I put in about synergy and
Just
brands?
pick the buzzwords.
I put best experience for our shareholders. I thought might have been too much, but that
You were on a conference call recently where you just started writing down buzzwords, didn't you?
I didn't put. There's more I could go with business, but I thought about if I went too far, it would be too obvious. So
Sure.
I'm glad I fooled you.
Well,
but
you deceived me. Okay.
now you're going to narrow it down pretty well here. Okay.
Yeah.
Number 4.
We got Walt Disney for one of the last two,
Number 4.
or both.
Well, we're convinced we must start with the public need. And the need is not just for curing the old ills of old cities. We think the need is for starting from scratch on virgin land and building a special kind of new community.
Well, that screams Walt Disney. Whether that's correct or not, I don't know, but I'm going to say Walt Disney.
Yeah, that's correct. I really didn't write these to try and totally fool you. So, that was Walt Disney in 1966 talking about Epcot. It's in like the intro of that Epcot Center creating the World of
Sure.
Tomorrow book. So I think he may have said it in the film, but I know it's in the intro there. So.
Now you're benefiting here because I'm not much of a reader.
Well, so far you've gotten 3 out of 4, and the only one you missed was the one where I faked it. So I don't really think that's fair. So
Well, I just I don't know if your listeners are aware. I'm pretty sure you read 19 books a week. So just full disclosure here.
I don't know. Right now, I feel like I read about 10 pages and fall asleep, but I am always reading something, I will say. So I'm not as on top of it. Okay, number 5. Confident and in a great mood, I emerged from the car smiling. Then I walked up to make a short speech from the steps of the exchange, still confident, still smiling. Suddenly, objects started flying through the air toward me.
I don't have a clue. Read it again.
Okay. Confident and in a great mood, I emerged from the car smiling. Then I walked up to make a short speech from the steps of the exchange, still confident, still smiling. Suddenly, objects started flying through the air toward me.
I'm going to guess George W. Bush shortly before he dodged a shoe being thrown at his head.
No, but I mean, obviously that's not one of the options, but you're kind of in the right zone in terms of things being thrown
Oh, you know
at
what?
someone.
I'm saying Eisner. I feel that he was heckled at one point at a public thing. I'm going to say Eisner.
Yes, this is Michael Eisner in his book. This is at a Disneyland Paris press conference. They showed a clip from this in the Imagineering story.
Yeah.
I forget what they were throwing at him, but he showed up like all happy, and a bunch of protesting people in France started throwing, I want to say it was oranges, or I forget, throwing things, or eggs.
It was some sort of consumable food. I didn't think of that, but yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, that was the one I thought of that scene. I'm like, oh, I wonder if he talks about in this book. And he did. So good job, Tim. You got all of them right except for the fake one. But
and you deceived me, so good job, Dan, as well.
Well, I just thought, that was fun. I'm not going to have games all the time, but I felt like, if anyone could tell the difference, it would be you. Chapek and Iger would have been the cruel way to try and figure out how to tell the difference, but I wouldn't want to do that too.
Puppet and puppeteer right there.
Basically. All right, Tim. Well, this has been a lot of fun. So if people want to follow you online, check out your work, what are you doing right now? Where should they go?
So you can find me on WDW Theme Parks on Twitter, wdwthemeparks.com, and then once a month, Josh, Ben, and I put out an episode of the Marty Called podcast. We do a lot of these types of armchair Imagineering exercises, so if this is your thing, then feel free to listen to it. And you can find that over on martycalled.com or any place that you normally download podcasts.
Well, awesome. Well, Tim, I hope that last game would not keep you from coming back another time. But this was really fun. I enjoyed going through all these ideas that I'm sure will happen someday.
Always a pleasure.
Well, that was really fun. If you enjoyed this episode, Tim and I have talked 4 other times. We've gone through Fixing Epcot, Galaxy's Edge, Pandora, lots of Disney news, and so much more. You can find those episodes and all the other episodes of the Tomorrow Society podcast by going to tomorrowsociety.com/podcasts with an S at the end. And don't forget about the free preview of the Tomorrow Society Bulletin. Go to tomorrowsociety.com/bulletin to listen to the episode and learn more about the Patreon page. If you'd like to get a hold of me, send me an email, dan@tomorrowsociety.com. Follow me on Twitter at tomorrowsoc, or Facebook or Instagram at Tomorrow Society. Don't forget about the YouTube channel. I just posted the Laserphonic Fantasy, a home video of that nighttime show at Epcot from 1986. Go to tomorrowsociety.com/YouTube to learn all about that and subscribe to the channel. The Tomorrow Society podcast is hosted, produced, and edited by Dan Heaton. The music was written by Adam Hookey and performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Once again, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Please take care of yourself out there. Let's all get through the winter together so we can enjoy Walt Disney World and so many other theme parks later on in 2021. Please wear your masks. Take care and be safe, and I will talk to you again very soon.